Now suppose the situation had been reversed. Suppose the government was spending a lot on poverty all these years, and then we saw poverty fall. And then the government, because evil libertarians got in charge, and the government stopped spending money on it, and then poverty leveled off. You know what we would hear. Well, this just goes to show government spending is what alleviates poverty. And if we get rid of the government spending, then it stagnates. But exactly the opposite is the truth. So what do we hear in the headlines or in textbooks? Nothing. Crickets. Nothing at all. No acknowledgement of this whatsoever. And the domestic analog to foreign aid has been the welfare state. And the welfare state has corresponded with a stagnation in the poverty rate, the same way that foreign aid to other countries responded in the same way. All right, so the other thing is, well, if we have freedom, then the environment is going to be damaged and, we're all going to die instantly. Now, I understand that sort of argument. We should remember that the workers' paradises where you had centrally planned economies were not known for environmental quality. In fact, in the Soviet Union, it was a crime, it was a felony to drop a lit cigarette into the Volga River because it was a fire hazard. A river was a fire hazard. So we should bear this in mind. But of course, number one, a libertarian would, properly speaking, wouldn't think of pollution as being a form of aggression. If it is a form of trespass onto your property and does damage to your health and to your property, then it ought to be actionable. And there's that great article, Law, Property Rights, and Air Pollution, where Murray Rothbard lays out exactly how that would be dealt with in a free society. So first of all, it's a caricature to think that, well, we libertarians, we love pollution. Like, yeah, that's how we know that industry is really cranking things out. Like, if I'm not coughing, it's not capitalist. That's not really how we think. But also, property rights are what make possible the care of the environment. Now, we get told, for example, that the American Indians, they didn't have private property. They were purer than that. They were like Rousseau's noble savage. This is all a fantasy invented by people who couldn't care less about the real truth of the American Indians. They just want to exploit these people on behalf of central planning. The fact is that numerous American Indian tribes, not only did they have private property, but they assigned property rights, for example, in hunting. They would say, this family can hunt in this area. Well, that's good, because if you don't assign that, then everybody's just going to kill every animal in that area. Because if nobody owns the area, if they do own the area, they think, well, if I kill all the animals, then next year there ain't going to be no animals. So I guess I don't want to kill them all now. I want to, because I can enjoy the capital value, long-term value of this land, I better not kill all of them now. I better leave some to reproduce. But if there's no private property, and you try to do that, you try to say, you know what, I'm going to restrain myself, I'm not going to kill all the animals, I'm going to wait till next year, then somebody else just come in and kill them, because you have no property right. So the incentive then, under public property, is for everybody to kill as much as possible right away, so that nobody else gets it. But as soon as you assign a property right in it, you have the urge to care for it. This is also true in the Pacific Northwest. The American Indians assigned fishing rights for salmon, so that there wouldn't be overfishing. People wouldn't just fish out all the salmon, leaving nothing for the following year. So there's a lot of common sense to the libertarian position. Well, wouldn't the free market, we're taught in school, if we have what you people are calling for, I mean, it sounds nice when you talk about it, but really it's going to lead to monopolies. It's going to lead to wicked people, short little people with white mustaches carrying sacks of money with dollar signs on them running around. They're going to be running the economy. And that's what you libertarians want. You love corporations, man. Well, okay, for one thing, if we love corporations so much, how come they don't donate to us? Okay. There are some corporations that would rather see the whole world burn to the ground than have a free market. But in fact, this whole free market yields monopolies thing, first of all, it comes in part from what we learned in junior high school. Because I remember when I was in junior high school, I just couldn't believe how anyone could support the market economy. I couldn't understand this. It leads to these monopolists who dominate the economy by the throat, and only our progressive leaders could possibly emancipate us from this terrible serfdom and all that. But when you actually look at it, it's true, you have some really predatory entrepreneurs who are using their political connections to get them special benefits, tariffs that protect them from competition, whatever. But when you look at people who didn't do that, you actually have people I don't see why I'm supposed to despise. Why am I supposed to despise Cornelius Vanderbilt, for example? This is a guy who, before he got into railroads later in his career, he's a guy who defied the government's steamboat monopoly in the New York area. And then when the monopoly was overturned, he competed with existing steamboat companies, and he would say, well, you want to go from A to B? It used to be $3 a trip, now it's 10 cents a trip on my boat. Or in some trips, he would say, it costs you nothing. You can ride for free, but I hope you're hungry because I'll make money selling you food. This is an astonishing contribution to the world. Or then he used his railroad to transport mail. And he's transporting mail across the country. And he's competing against a subsidized railroad line. He's getting government money, and he's still doing it for a quarter of the rate. And the subsidized line goes out of business, and he prospers. Why am I supposed to dislike a benefactor of mankind like this? Why am I taught that this is the wicked person? But the great, wise, benign, benevolent people are these U.S. presidents whose faces look down upon me from the top of the classroom wall. Why is that? Well, it's a rhetorical question. So there's, of course, we talk about Andrew Carnegie. Single-handedly, the guy reduces the price of steel rails in a quarter century from $160 a ton to $17 a ton. I'm supposed to hate that guy? Now, Rockefeller, okay, you could talk about the things his foundation did, whatever. That's a separate question. I'm talking about as an entrepreneur. I mean, this is a guy who takes the price of kerosene and drops it from $1 to 10 cents. Now, the government can't ever do anything like this. This improves everybody's standard of living. Because now everything that uses that as an input gets cheaper. Everything that uses steel as an input gets cheaper. People's standard of living rises across the board. All the government can do is take stuff from some people and give it to you. And that is, not only is that a wash, it's a dead weight loss because of the inefficiencies and everything else involved. But these people actually did improve people's standard of living. This goes on today, and we are taught to despise people who are involved in commerce. We're taught to be total jerks to store clerks, for example. You treat and I say you, present company accepted, but we're taught to treat store clerks like garbage. Like there's one tiny thread wrong on your clothes, and I mean, you are going to make hell over this thing. Whereas the TSA is sticking their hands down your pants, and you're going, well, you do what you got to do, man. Like, there's something wrong here. Right? I mean, people have got to be schooled to think this way, because that is not a normal reaction to this. Also, okay, so then the claim is, but we do have monopolists, and then they take over, and then they can drive their competitors out of business. They just make their prices super low, nobody compete with them, they drive everybody out of business. It's called predatory pricing. Again, I've talked about that in some books. I have an article coming out on this from the Future of Freedom Foundation in a little while. But for now, I'll just say that there's almost no evidence of this ever actually happening. There are firms that drive other firms out of business, yes, but that's consumers drive those firms out of business, not the firm, really. But where's the suddenly high prices that they're supposed to then impose on the rest of us? They never materialize. And there are a whole lot of reasons for that. There are a whole lot of reasons that predatory pricing is a counterproductive strategy. And there are a whole lot of ways, market mechanisms, that even if that were possible, that could fight against that. But as I said, I've got an article coming out on this, and I have so much else to say. I'll put that as a footnote. Check tomwoods.com. Eventually there'll be an article on predatory pricing. But I have talked about that in my Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. And finally, the antitrust laws. Notice that antitrust complaints do not typically come from consumers. Consumers do not go to the government and say, I am so sick and tired of paying so little for this product. I am so sick and tired of getting this product for free. Please do something about it. Never has. It's always the competitor. That should tell you something about what the real interests involved in that are. Okay, but things would be unsafe. Right? There would be quacks taking advantage of us. We're too stupid to look after ourselves. So these are the same people who say we're smart enough to vote for people who are going to make decisions that are of momentous historic significance that can affect the whole world. We're smart enough to do that, but we're too stupid to pick a doctor. Like, we can't just look, take 1 second on the internet and find some basic clearinghouse of doctors who are respected. We're too stupid to do that for our own health. However, we can vote for a guy who's going to make policy against Iran. It seems to me it's either one or the other, but you can't have this kind of contradiction. But we think about something like occupational licensing. The state has to license people, because otherwise we'll all be taken advantage of. Well, again, not only are there private certification agencies all over the place, I mean, there's, even in terms of regulation, Underwriters Laboratories certifies electrical products. That's a private organization. It puts its seal of approval on a product, and if that product is unsafe, Underwriters Laboratories is ruined. Whereas if some government bureaucracy puts its symbol on there and it's unsafe, are they ruined? Are they ruined? No, their budget doubles. They're not ruined. Look at the incentive that's there. But also think about whenever you see some requirement that this or that occupation has to get a special government license, ask yourself this. Do the existing firms in that industry have to comply with the requirements for the license? So for instance, sometimes they increase the number of hoops you have to jump through to get the license. They say, well, from now on, all the flower arrangers now have to prove that they can do X or Y. Do they ever apply that retroactively to the existing flower arrangers? Never, of course not. Now, if this were really for the general public's well-being, wouldn't we be equally as threatened by bad existing flower arrangers as we would be from new entrants to the field? And yet it's only to the new entrants that they apply these regulations. Could it be that this is meant that way? Could it be that Adam Smith's insight that you can't get businessmen together for 3 seconds without them angling against the public in one way or another, that maybe he was right? Ah, well, indeed. And then moreover, I didn't pick that at random. There are some states that require flower arrangers to be licensed. Think of the dangers we averted there. What about the arts and sciences, though? I mean, it's really nice of us to talk about freedom and we cooperate on the market, these miracles take place, but there'd be no art if it weren't for the government. If there weren't a Joe Biden paternally watching over all of us, I mean, every artist in the world would just put his paintbrush down and say, I just can't go on. Is that the case? Well, you know what? Actually, the fact is that when you look at the National Endowment for the Arts, I mean, what is it? I don't even remember what its budget is these days. It might be $200 million a year. However, the amount of money that is voluntarily given by people to the arts every year is in the billions of dollars. And in fact, what in fact do we wind up getting from government arts? Do we get the best artists? Is that what typically happens? No, what we get is artists who happen to be good at filling out government grant applications. These tend not to be the best artists, by the way. Just might think of that. Yeah, what about the sciences, though? Now, surely you people can't be such Neanderthals. I mean, without government involvement, we'd have no science. Nobody would even be interested in the science. We'd all be worshiping thunder, you know, or sacrificing an ox to Thor or something if it weren't for government funding of the sciences. But it turns out, again, if you look actually at history, you look at before people's fortunes were being decimated by death taxes and income taxes and all that, the private sector vastly outperformed the public sector in donations to the sciences. I mean, not even close. Same thing with welfare spending, by the way. So there's that, and then there are government arguments, well, people can't capture the profits of science for themselves, or there's no profit in basic science. I talk about this in Rollback a little bit longer. The key book on this, if you are interested in the sciences, is this wonderful book by Terence Keeley, K-E-A-L-E-Y, called The Economic Laws of Scientific Research. And man, the scientific establishment absolutely hated him for writing this book, where he showed that the claims that are made for government science funding are every single one of them is faulty. Not one of them actually conforms to the observed data. And moreover, what typically happens with government science funding is that one point of view is privileged. Because politicians are not, they feel like they can't get away with funding this approach to cancer cures and that contradictory approach to cancer cures, because they're afraid taxpayers will say, hey, you're funding different things, half of these things are going to be wrong. So what they do is they say, what's the consensus among scientists? They pour all the money into the consensus, and that builds up this one way of thinking. Anybody who's a dissenter from that is immediately ostracized, marginalized, can't get any attention, and so science becomes inevitably politicized. We're also told that if it's just you and me interacting and exchanging things, we cause depressions. Depressions just occur spontaneously on the market. People become greedy at a particular moment, and then suddenly depressions occur. There's not enough spending, like whatever the rationale is, we're told that depressions occur. But our answer to that is that depressions are not natural to the market economy. There's no reason for them to be natural to the market economy. Businesses going